Good morning, good day, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to today's DX Cafe session. I'm Matt McQueenie from Conobos. Our session today is a mouthful, but it's really important today. Navigating the AI revolution, unleashing potential in content editing and the Headless CMS. And I am so pleased to be joined here by someone who's become a friend of mine and a really smart person in the space, Martin Michalik, and he's the VP of Product at Kontent.ai, which is a headless CMS we do a lot of work with, and they have some really exciting things as it comes to AI and generative AI. So, Martin, I'm going to start off by letting you introduce yourself, and we were talking before about pronunciation. So you allowed me to say your last name as I said it. Why don't you say it the way we're supposed to say it, and then introduce yourself as well?
Yeah. So hello everyone, and thanks Matthew for having me. Just a couple of seconds ago, I told Matthew that my name is of Polish origin. It's always tricky for English native speakers to pronounce. So it's actually Michalik. It's the h that is the problem. It's usually quite easy for Dutch speakers because they have the h as well. But that's just a funny thing I figured as I traveled the world. As Matthew said, I'm the VP of Product at Kontent.ai, and I've been with the company for 8 years now. And something that we've been investing into for a couple of basically years now is the vision of how we see the content management change. And we will touch that today a bit. But I think it's a pretty exciting time now with all the stuff happening around AI and finally AI getting into the public knowledge and people actually realizing, hey, there's a new technology that's pretty cool and we can leverage, even though there are some challenges.
So, Martin, an interesting thing. We are a couple of days past a year
Yeah.
since Content AI. We'll use some headless terms, decoupled from
Yes.
Kentico, and I remember that date because it happens to be my birthday. So, thank you for that present. But when that announcement happened, it was a big deal at the time, even in your messaging, to use .ai at the
Yeah.
end. Now, if you could speak a little bit to the evolution a year ago, where you thought that AI was important, and then how things evolved so fast, where it's almost in a different thought space than even you probably thought a year ago, right?
Yeah, you're right. And like as you're saying, when we decoupled, I love this term. Um, People were skeptic, right, about AI in general, what it is and how it can influence their lives. I think that I can say that no one is skeptical these days. I hope so, because people now realize that AI is very powerful in many areas. It's not perfect. We'll talk about that. But so many new opportunities opened just thanks to the announcements of ChatGPT and other services that came quickly after. Which literally showed what is possible and how easy it is that and apply that in basically every manual tasks that you do today. And since then, there was so much hype about AI that I don't believe there's many professionals in general that didn't hear about AI at all.
It's very true. I even remember when we were at the Content Horizons event in November of the end of last year in 2022 in New York City, and there were presentations about how AI, look, it's not the be all end all, but
Yeah.
here are a couple of ways we can absolutely do it. And there's nothing wrong with what the speakers said there, but I wonder if, from your point of view, before we kind of delve deeper into these specific subjects, you're in charge of product. Products are big on roadmaps. How did you adjust for this happening so fast, really at the turn of the year? And we'll get into some of the things you've already integrated from a native point of view. But how do you adjust? How do you how do you determine from a product point of view how real the promise is, and how much do you have to almost move your teams along to make
Yeah.
sure to catch this wave?
So it all comes down to how ready is your organization. And so there are two angles. One is the software development angle. So when you have organization with high agility, then it's pretty easy for you to adjust. And for us, it was a matter of weeks to adjust, to start exploring the technology and start building technology in the product. Obviously, you also need to discuss the vision and how it can change what you're doing with your product. So that's the other part, right? Which is kind of the leap of faith. But as we discussed, AI was for a long time a part of our identity, part of our branding. So for us, making that leap was easier. It's also the reason why we took a different path than majority of vendors and actually built native integrations and native capabilities within the product, not just some plugins that you can explore and try it out, but it's really built in native capabilities.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And so I think we'll get into our first question, but as we do this, how does Martin use generative AI yourself, personally, professionally? How do you find yourself going to it?
Yeah, so it's kind of also interesting question for me, because at the very beginning I was skeptical about AI. When I'm saying this, I'm not skeptical anymore, and the thing that changed my mind was really using it and seeing how easy it is in streamlining basically every grind when it comes to content creation, and all the tedious tasks that are related to basically any form of content creation. So I do, and you know that, Matthew, that I do myself produce content around product management, how to do product management in SaaS business, basically. And I'm not a native speaker. So for me, creating a quality content in English that is fluid and received, and it's sometimes difficult for me to create really engaging content. So because it's really difficult, I don't know the phrases, I don't know the slang that well, because it's always kind of difficult when you're not a native speaker. But I try to use this actively, and it really sped up the whole process significantly. So I still need to invest significant amount of time into my content, but it's much less than before. And seeing that in action really turned me into a believer into how this can reduce the time to market for organizations dealing with lots of content, where content is a strategic asset. How it can make the room for other activities, how they can improve the content to perform better, etc., etc. So it's really the act of trying it, seeing it in action, to actually realize the value and how basically it empowers. And I'm specifically talking about content creation, of text content creation, how it empowers anyone who has an idea to turn it into something that can be consumed by other people. So to answer your question, we have on the slide, it is essentially, and when it comes to content creation, it's democratizing content creation. So if you have a topic that you want to share with the world, or you are, let's say, you're an expert in, but you're not a copywriter, so there was this barrier for you, I don't know how to write content. This was democratized. You can now go and you can shape the prompts to help you to write the content. You will still need to fine tune it and make it your own, but the heavy lifting can AI do for you.
Yeah, it's really an interesting thing the way it's all really escalated.
Yeah.
I'll just show one of our comments. This is from Ken Gray from Konobos. He was remarking on something you said earlier, how the skepticism in some ways has turned into fear, and that is often something we have to navigate. The promise of something very quickly with the psychology of the human brain can can change by the hour sometimes. But
And
yeah, go ahead.
it kind of almost feels like a black magic, right? So it is scary. For example, I tried it when I was showing to a couple of my friends who are not that knowledgeable about AI and what it can do. I'm like, hey, I can generate a bedtime story for my son about Walmart branded milk, and the AI just went and created a 4-paragraph story about it. And I was like, in a couple of seconds. But you need to direct the tool to actually create the results that you want, and that's not easy.
Yeah, I like the term that you see in one of the products, a Copilot,
Yeah,
right? Like you want to have, I feel that you should be able to do anything that you're trying to use ChatGPT for or generative AI. You should be able to do it on your own. But
yeah,
if it can catalyze you to get there quicker, and I know we have a slide later on as well that kind of hits on this balance, but if it can get you there quicker, it means maybe you can do 4 times as many things from your brain
yeah,
that you might not do otherwise. And there's more opportunity now
yeah,
to have ideas, to create new products, to see if a story you've been working on in your head, but you just didn't know how to start it, like a novel or a movie or a
yeah,
script. Like there's just you have to think in those ways how it can almost expand and ameliorate your own skill sets, right?
yeah, exactly. So it's
So
it's
when
it's,
we
it's, it's an accelerator of your creativity.
Absolutely. Now, when we look at this slide again with the AI transforming many industries, how do you see it specifically revolutionizing the headless CMS domain, which is yours? And then I'd also like to bring in here some behind the scenes stuff. You would put a note on here. Are we talking about AI or generative AI? And I thought that was maybe an interesting place to start while
Yeah,
you were asking that question.
because I believe that the generative AI is just the tip of an iceberg that we'll see in the upcoming years. Um, And the reason why I believe that is because the whole generative AI movement accelerated all the related AI movements. So there's a lot of money flowing into AI in general, and there are some um, adjacent areas that are being developed, such as data analysis. So imagine that you have a model that is going to be optimized for analyzing a huge volumes of data. Just you feed the model all your API logs, and it will help you identify patterns in the data, how your site is used, unused, and what are some patterns in your content. Just to explain, and to address the question, when I start with the generative AI, I feel what is going to change is we'll see that all the tedious task, all the grind is going to go away, for good and for bad, because we'll see that content practitioners in general will be able to produce content much faster. And in general, the content volume is going to explode, which brings me to the other half. And I know we have that later. We're going to discuss that, but there's a challenge that will need to be addressed later, or as DI is getting adopted. What I feel is going to be the phase number 2 and number 3 is we will see more different AI services accelerating adjacent problems. So as already teased, the data analysis, we'll see services focusing on SEO, or maybe we'll already see SEO becoming completely obsolete because of AI. We'll see services recommending similarities in content and doing some content audits for you. So these kind of services will start emerging. And I feel the overall paradigm of CMSs is going to shift. And I feel that the content practitioners are going to be more in the role of orchestrators of these services than just like the guys and women who are just producing content. They will be orchestrating different services that under the hood do all the heavy lifting. So that's my view of how the future is going to look like.
Does being a headless CMS versus maybe a more all-in-one system, does it make it easier to connect with something like ChatGPT or generative AI because of the modularity of content and content models and having easier ways to kind of to parse and get to the content?
Yeah, definitely. Because first of all, you have the content that you will eventually feed into the model structured, which helps, and you have it stored in basically in a way that it can be consumed by any API, right? So if you have an SDK or just pulling the data through the REST API, you have it usually in JSON, and you just feed it to other services. So being API first definitely helps, but it's not just about being API first. It's also about the modularity helps you to connect different services and swap them as your content needs are evolving. So being agile is also important, and headless CMS as such is giving you that agility.
Perfect. All right, so we just talked about this and teased it. One of the interesting parts of this new paradigm is, like you called it, an explosion of content volume. How much of it is like a ChatGPT building on top of a ChatGPT? How much of it's scraped from all known internet content? But there is no doubting the fact that there is an impending explosion of content. How do we manage that? And I'm guessing that a solid CMS will help you.
Yeah, I think the main challenge is going to be whether you want to be one of those companies out there that just wants to produce more. Because with the AI becoming such a catalyst of content production, I feel more companies will start adopting, and will have to start adopting approach like less is more, and they will focus more on quality over quantity. Because I don't know if you, but myself, there was not a moment in the couple of months, past months, that I was like, hey, I wish there was more content I could consume, right? There is already way too much content we are facing every day, and we have limited hours to do so. So we've already started seeing companies, just even before the AR revolution, reducing the volume of content they produce, and they started focusing more on the quality of content and performance of the content. So really adopting the approach less is more. And I feel that the natural step also in the headless CMS evolution is actually helping the companies where content is strategic asset, really to help them to make the most out of what they have and what they create. So not necessarily create more, but create better performing content. Where AI can help is, first of all, it can help you create the content, but later down the road, I'm 100% sure there will be services to help you to create self-optimizing content. So you will get the first version out and you will feed the model the data from the consumption. It will propose some adjustments, and you will adjust the content as it is live. And again, based on the performance, you will adjust it further. And then you will converge to a moment where you are really happy about how the content is performing, and then you move to the next piece.
Yeah, it's interesting when you use it yourself how you do find the more quality you input into the prompt, the better the response. Although I am kind of let down sometimes when the response cuts out all this. I guess it feels it's fluff, but
Yeah.
all story I like. But what it does is it like you said, it helps you just it catalyzes. It just gets you from here to there like jumping on a lily pad where you can then action it, right? Like if you give it a good amount of content in the prompt, which you're saying if you're a quality content organization and you can kind of feed it in there, and then like we're going to talk about native sandboxes, if you're feeding it all of your own stuff, there's not really potentially copyright things, but what it might show you is novel connections between all the modular content you have.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that is what innovation is. It's the combination of what were thought to be disparate pieces or pieces that weren't able to be connected because maybe the human brain couldn't connect that over 5 years this piece of content was created and then this one's being worked on now. But I think it's really in catalyzing your best foot forward.
Yeah. So I feel really at the moment we can say that the AI is helping you to create more content, but not necessarily better content. And that's the portion of love you still need to put into your content creation, because those 20% will make the difference. And I know, again, we will discuss a bit later, but this is now what is the situation today. It can change completely in a couple of months or tomorrow as the models evolve. But at the moment, we are seeing it's helping you to produce more, but you still need to make sure the content is on brand, it's the quality you expect, it's within your brand guidelines. And just doing that in ChatGPT natively in the browser that OpenAI provides you, it's very difficult.
Good point. So, why is it critical for organizations to align with vendors that have AI in their roadmap? I think we've talked a lot about that, but we can hit more. And then, how can a customer, a prospect who's going through procurement, which is often hard enough, then this whole generative AI thing gets thrown into the mix, which is a great opportunity. But, again, when you're trying to usher through digital transformation, it can feel like another thing to account for in this composable market. How can they differentiate between not only the, like we say here, the hype of AI and generative AI and its actual potential, but like, is there a feeling for how you, as a customer, tell the difference between like for like providers and their way of implementing this?
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer your first question, the answer is very simple. It's the future. The genie is out of the bottle and he's not getting back. The AI is going to stay, it's going to evolve, and it's going to transform the industries, not just content production, many others. Just a couple of days ago, I saw a great post, and there's a company, and they are basically creating backgrounds for the green screen scenes in the movies. So they're using AI to generate the locations. So if you're filming a sci-fi movie, you can now have an AI generate the planet you're at. So it's really changing many industries. And the effect is so massive that at the moment, they don't seem to be any reason why to not leverage it. So organizations that do put it on the roadmap are those, I would say, that have a vision for the future, how the future can look like. And if you want to be successful, you want to have someone supporting you, and someone should have some forward thinking and see and have a vision of the future. So that's why I want to say it's the future. And how the companies can differentiate between hype and actual potential, that can be tricky. But I feel the basic question they can start asking now is how the AI is implemented. How does the architecture look like? And you mentioned the procurement process that today is critical and complicated. But I feel that AI will just become another part of that procurement process. And today, companies are asking about the architecture of the CMS. What are the services that are used today to actually build the CMS? And this is going to be a subsection of that question. And the way how the service and the AI assistants or copilots are built actually tells you a lot about how the vendor treats the AI. Because as I said, there are differences. You can either build it natively and make it a part of your ecosystem, really tightly coupled, or you can just have it as a plugin and basically have interacted with the open model. And there are differences and consequences for organizations. Different approaches have different benefits, but they also have different consequences. And then it's up to your organization to really then decide what approach they prefer more and what they want to use actually.
It's funny, a kind of an aside, but based on that AI example you chose on the backgrounds. It's interesting. You're in Czech Republic where a lot of cool stuff is shot. But I heard something on the radio yesterday where Tom Cruise is on a mission to shoot a movie in space, and how difficult that. Imagine how difficult that is. It's
Yeah.
getting easier with uh, commercial space flight, but then you think of that and it shows you how quick things can change. That's an interesting mission, but now we have technologies and tools where the risk to do that almost might be so reckless, when you could probably feel being in space, when you could create a setting that looks more like in space than you're actually there, and it just goes to kind of show how fast things can go. Like I
Yeah.
forget that saying, but sometimes weeks, sometimes decades go by in weeks, and sometimes one of these things where everything stays static for so long, but then everything can change in a week. It really does seem like that happened, and now we're on this escalator trying to figure out, okay, have we reached some kind of cruising altitude? How much more do we keep trying to push the bounds? Now we got to get back to work, right? It's got this feel of just
Yeah.
constantly going up. Maybe it is like going to space.
Maybe, but knowing Tom Cruise, he will definitely go into space.
Well, that's why I shouldn't have said cruise control, right? Because
Yeah.
that could mean something else for him.
Yeah.
So we talked about this, and I didn't put a question here. I actually put a quote that you gave me, which is that using AI is actually hard. It won't solve all your problems. It will get you only 80% there, which you say only, but that's an only that's a great only, but also will prove why it's, you still need to invest 20% of efforts to make the content authentic. So we've referred to this, but let's now talk in your point of view. What is that 20%? What is that love that you discuss?
So, so you said it yourself. Sometimes you are quite disappointed with the outcomes that the tool is going to provide to you. And it's also related to the first part of my quote is knowing how to write the prompt to produce what you want is not easy task. It's very easy to get average outcome based on average input, but to get it perform is difficult. It's also actually a significant portion of our development efforts when we are building the native capabilities in the product, because nailing the prompt down to actually produce quality content is not a simple it's not a simple sentence. Hey, just give me a summary of this, because then you will get really average results, and you don't want to produce average results as a content practitioner. So those 80% represent the major heavy lifting that actually helping you to shape the outline of the content, producing the majority of the content. But the content is going to be as good as the current model is, and as good as the context the model has. So you'll need to invest into passing that context over to that model. You also need to make sure that you parameterize the prompt well, so it's moving within and producing within some boundaries. But then even with output generated, you need to go through it, you need to review it, you need to drop some things, write some things yourself, and you need to make sure that all the content that is produced is within your brand language, that the brand guidelines are applied, that the feel of the content is the same as the rest of your content. So there's quite a lot of work actually that needs to still happen. And that's the reason why I also don't believe copywriters will be replaced by AI. Their job is just going to shift. And it's going to be different workloads, but you still need to invest to make your content authentic, basically.
How did you find as a company the testing of this process? I mean, you probably had your own instance and you're just plugging away at it, trying to figure out how was that evolution to get to where we are today with it?
So it's hard. It's hard. It's the most difficult part of making it work, actually. And it's also something that is going to evolve as the models are going to evolve. So going back to your question about how to differentiate between hype and reality, if you ask the vendor what is the process of their evolution of what they have built, if there's none, well, then you know that the functionality will only stay as good as it is now, because it's not going to evolve. And we are trying new models as they come out. We are trying to optimize the prompts to really produce the results. And also we're gathering feedback from the users who are in our early access program, who have the first access to this functionality. So there's a lot of actually effort going into it, making sure that it's performing. And it's also about using the right technology that helps you to actually pass the context and combine the queries together to create one more powerful workflow that is processing then the whole output basically that you're getting.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably something we should say here is we're not showing a picture of it here. You can find the demos out there, what it looks like. But what you're doing here, the difference between just having, for instance, ChatGPT, you're taking the models and kind of controlling for how best they're going to work in the system, right? Like you're giving a couple of the common, most useful prompts. I don't want to say baked in, but available there, where you almost just choose from an option of what's going to be useful from one of these models for the Kontent.ai Headless CMS.
Yeah, so basically when you're using a plain ChatGPT, there's just a prompt, and whatever you put in, it's going to use to shape the output. What we're doing is on the background, we are optimizing some queries for that. So when you see just shorten the text, there is more into that prompt than just shorten the text. There's some additional context pushed to that model that helps you to produce better output than just like, hey, just take this paragraph and shorten it.
Yeah. So our next one, I'm going to put, thanks Ken for the comments. He had noted that we at Konobos have been able to speed up content creation and other writing activities by 75%, which is meaningful. And maybe we'll parlay that a little bit into this question, which is, how can organizations, and let's really talk enterprise organizations, how do they prepare for staffing needs? AI is, we've used the term democratizing, but it's changing technical content, creativity skills in just one fell swoop in many ways. How are you seeing, and how do you feel we prepare for these?
Yeah, so there are two angles that come to my mind. The first one is the angle of people and the talent that you will need. I'm going to use a parallel again, or a metaphor. It's similar to photography, and like we do, like we all have phones, and what phones did, they democratized photography. So everyone now today, even if they are as poor photographer as I am, and have absolutely no knowledge of lighting, composition, etc., just the natural skills, are able to take very decent photos of moments that matter to them. What they need to do is just create those moments, and they take snapshots of them with their phone, and the phone will do the processing. They will take the best picture. They will tell you can adjust what moments you want in that live photo. It does all the heavy lifting, and this is like when it comes to production, this is going to be very similar. You will need to create those magical moments. That creativity part is going to be on the organization. They will have to figure it out, but the heavy lifting will be done for them in the long term. So organizations from that standpoint will need to think whether they have staff ready for it, whether they have enough creative people that will be able to make the content stand out of the masses of content that are going to be produced. They will need to think about data, whether they have people who can analyze data to again feed to the models the performance data so you can create better performing content. So really focus more on how you can differentiate yourself in masses of content and in huge volume, whether it's data, creativity, and these kind of folks, and just ignore the heavy lifting because that is going to be automated. The other part, how organization needs to prepare are policies, and policies how to use the technology. Because one of the discussion areas the whole artificial intelligence opened is the use of AI and term of responsible AI, but even just general policies, how you should use AI in your content creation process. Many organizations today, they use it, but they don't have any policies in place, which is potentially risky. So these are the two angles the organizations need to prepare for.
Well, it's interesting. Bringing back, I'm going to turn this into math. Bringing back our 80-20, that 80% is covered in what you talked about with how the phone democratized photography.
Yeah.
Or when you think about how 20 years ago blogging democratized content writing, podcasting kind of democratized radio. So what happens is that 80% becomes the default, and it's now 100% of the 20% that's left.
Yeah.
And who can create innovations atop those platforms that are now taken for granted, that you don't need to do the legwork on, even the TikToks, the Instagram, the Reels, all these things that are constantly being put out there. There's always going to be 100% of that 20% left, and there's going to be those who are in the top 5 or 10% of that. I don't know what that math is, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's all going to be about standing out. And it's the same, like it's the same. You mentioning podcasts, and it's another great example. Anyone can start a podcast today, but it's very difficult to create content that is so engaging that you have regular listeners.
That's exactly right. And I think, in talking this out, which is the great part of conversation, we're going to find generative AI natives who it's taken for granted, right?
Yeah.
It's taken for granted what it is. And the things they're going to create on top of it is maybe not even going to be that 20% left. It's going to be an expansion of a new percentage. That's just going to be the thing.
And one area we don't know much about is what about the new industries that will open because of that? and it happened with every change like that, even with the podcasting and streaming. I guess all the audio companies producing microphones had great years recently, right? So because everyone was buying microphones and cameras, but not just that. There's specialized software for streamers and for podcasting, and the same will happen with content production. Specialized tools will happen based on this revolution.
Well, and my last aside is that the podcast has been completely democratized even further by the phone being a studio and
Yeah.
microphone in one with the ear, and then there's processing that happens there that turns it into broadcast. And then companies like Spotify buy those companies, and now you have access to the entire Spotify network. So yeah, there's going to be a lot that we're not even thinking of right now that will burgeon from this. So let's get to the serious stuff here. As the adoption grows, how should, again, we're talking to enterprises, which is a different ball of wax, can of worms, whatever you want to use. How should these organizations address security concerns, especially in terms of the aforementioned, what we call the scraping of the internet and keeping what needs to be proprietary information proprietary?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a counter question. Imagine, would you in cannabis, would you take some contract that you have with one of your clients? Would you walk out on the street and hand it out to a stranger?
I can't speak for anyone else. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, we would not do that.
and this is actually happening in organizations today. Because, as I mentioned, many organizations use the available tools, ChatGPT, and they use it, honestly, put it frankly, recklessly. They use it to process their data. There were some cases, I think it was Italy, where some customer data, including financial statements, were leaked because of that. Because people do realize the value it can generate, but they don't realize the privacy and security implications. And that's actually the fear of leaks and fear of security incidents is these days the number one blocker for adoption of AI in large enterprises, according to studies by Gartner. And it's justified because you are essentially, for many organizations, content is the most valuable asset they have in their marketing team, right? So they are kind of scared to share it with a third party, and then they have no idea what is happening with that content. So when you use, for example, Pardo today, and you are basically putting their contacts and names of your prospects, you know that these records are going to be stored in a database that are going to be processed in a certain way. When you are sharing your content with the ChatGPT, the open version, you have no idea what is happening with the content, how it is scraped, and what is going on. So these are legitimate concerns, and vendors that do again take the AI seriously, and it's again back to your question, how do you recognize the hype from reality, will have these things addressed. This is also one of the areas we take very seriously in Kontent.ai, and it's one of the reasons why we decided to implement these services natively and leverage a strategic partner, Microsoft, that allows you, that first of makes sure that the data is processed in compliant ways, but also allows you to basically create a sandbox environment for each of these services and making sure that the data that you put in is not leaking anywhere, and it's not scraped and reused. Because for many organizations, this is just a no-go.
there's some things we do not want democratized.
Exactly.
The other thing I've heard from vendors talking about how to deal with this security piece, and I think it's probably a boon to composable and headless solutions because you're using best of breed solutions for each part of the stack ostensibly. I heard one vendor say that the DAM, the digital asset management system, can be a safeguard against something like ChatGPT because you control your assets and how they are accessed by the outside world. So I think that this native sandbox, the controls are in the discussion about what level of control you want, and then because you're able to natively, I think you said, work with a Microsoft to the old term white. It's not quite white label, but to create your own instance of that isn't accessible potentially to an open system, but it gives a lot of there's potentially safeguards in some of these enterprise technologies.
And this is in general, this is going to be something all the AI vendors will have to address. But as with any other compliance, and especially today in the world of microservices, your overall tech stack is as compliant as the least compliant piece of the puzzle that you have there, right? So if you want your tech stack to be HIPAA compliant, you cannot have portions of the tech stack that are not HIPAA compliant because then your tech stack is not HIPAA compliant. So, and this is especially important as we will see more and more AI services popping up, is to make sure that when you are using this, make sure that they are compliant with your internal policies or policies that are required by law, because otherwise you are gonna break them. And as again, it's going back to hype versus reality, asking about how compliant the service is, how the data is managed, whether whether the content is shared somewhere, the contents of the prompt, or whether it's a sandbox environment. This is a great way how to distinguish serious companies and just companies that are riding the hype.
We have a very interesting comment here from our friend Mark Lamoth over at ABG, an enterprise organization. He's talking exactly about this stuff. We at ABG are having these talks and have been wanting to put out some internal rules concerning the use of ChatGPT and others like it. It's this, you always hear with Composable, this idea of the citizen developer.
Yeah.
And we are all citizen AIers.
Yes, but again, the rules are great and they have to be there. But majority of security incidents happen today because of the human error or of someone not willingly leaking the data. So even though you have rules in place, if you have system that allows for exploitation, that's a problem. So rules and policies are absolutely necessary, but you need to also have the support of the technology, because otherwise you will just leak it accidentally.
That's exactly right. All right. I think we've spoke a lot about it, but let's synthesize it because I think this is a unique selling proposition for the Content AI solution and generative AI. We call it here native sandboxed. What advantages do vendors who utilize a native sandbox offer in this evolving landscape of AI and content management?
So there are different angles. We just finished the angle of security. So having your data sandbox and allows us, Kontent.ai, to guarantee you that the content that you share within that prompt and that we feed into the engine is going to stay within that engine. So we have guarantees from Microsoft that this is the case. So you can stop thinking about whether your content is going to leak. It's secure from this perspective. It also allows vendors to then fine-tune the model and fine-tune the service that is actually being applied on your content to tweak it to perform better than just the general tool that is available from OpenAI, for example. So that's another angle. The third angle is that vendors will eventually need to figure out the pricing of this AI functionality, whether it's going to become a standard functionality or there are going to be different tiers. If you want to use AI in a serious fashion, you need to have those advanced functionalities, and usually are going to be, even from the generic tools that are available, they are going to be behind a paywall. So the vendors will take care of that, and you will have that as a part of some generic license agreement that you have with that vendor. So basically, the native approach will take care of a lot of hassle that you would otherwise have to address yourself. Basically, it's going to make it a part of the procurement.
Was there rigorous debate internally when you were deciding which path to go on?
I wouldn't say vigorous. I think it was pretty clear because for us at Kontent.ai, the security and governance were always hot topics. We know these are areas large enterprises were taking very seriously, and we knew that if we want to be the headless CMS with the most advanced governance capabilities, and we want to speak to industries that are regulated and they take these areas seriously, we couldn't just go with the open and generic approach, because we would just, as I said, we would create the whole in a strong chain. We would create a weak link that we would just plug in. So we knew we had to do it differently.
And this might be a behind the scenes business kind of discussion, and you can answer as much as you want. But in some ways, we joked about it being a year since Kontent.ai was born, decoupled. But you look a year out and where the evolution has gone in that AI part, and the decisions you make to split a company, in some ways help define how you make these kind of governance and security decisions, because you might be going after a slightly different ideal customer profile, right?
Yeah. I will just nod.
Thank you. But no. It shows you where a lot's going, and then so off of that. Sorry, it's the MBA in me. I like to go to those origin things.
I'll try to answer what I can. So it's splitting the company gave us freedom in direction, and what I can say that you will see a lot from us in the upcoming months and years. We have very, very ambitious plans.
Very nice. And not to say anything wrong about other folks, but it's just interesting in how what that freedom means in going at a specific goal. It's almost like composable business. But let's look at this last one here. Our last question. This has gone by, as we always say, it's gone by pretty quickly. But how do you envision the future of AI and headless CMS? That together, not the two separately. And what should businesses be doing now to prepare for this?
That's a tough question. I touched it a bit at the beginning when we were discussing how the paradigm is going to evolve. And I think that is true. I feel that the way how we create content is going to change. It is going to be, I'm not going to say it's going to be less work. I feel like that's the 100% discussion we had. The work is still going to be there, but it's going to be different. I feel we're going to be more in the roles of orchestrating different services, using different technologies, and the organizations need to prepare by watching the space, because the space is evolving super fast, and those organizations that will be able to leverage the new technologies will get an edge, because they will be able to produce faster. They are going to be able to produce content faster, and thus they will have more time for content optimization and other adjacent activities, maybe addressing new channels. We'll see. So definitely watch the space. Try the technology in a sandbox and see what it can do for you. And imagine how the future can look like if you don't have to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, and I think to your point, we talked about photography, we talked about podcasts, we talked about blogs. All of these things have the initial honeymoon phase, the boom and bust cycle, where everybody is on it. Every tweet you see is, here's how you make this K figure of passive income using this. And what happens is the hype cycle is going to come down, but the reality of the solution is there. So in many ways, seek to transform with it, as opposed to, we always like to say, don't be a day trader, right? Like seek to transform with it, because if you go into it for a quick hit of success immediately, it's probably not going to do that for you. But the long term, staying with it, connecting with it, evolving with it, and not looking to it to be a panacea, but a product in your suite that helps you do your business better and helps you hit your business goals. That, I think, is really where it feels like that hype cycle, if you could say so, a half year into this, has subsided, and it's getting a little more professional now.
Yeah, but I have to say we are just seeing the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg, and more is going to come. I know everyone is kind of feeling a bit of AI fatigue. That's understandable, but please make sure that you follow the trends, because if you're not following the trends, I can tell you your competitors are following them, and they're already thinking how this can be applied in their workflows.
Martin, the last quick question. You talked about staying on top of the trends. Where is a product leader in Headless CMS and AI transformation? Where are you following the trends? Who are you looking at?
That's very competitive information. I'm just going so if you are interested in AI and its possible applications, I'm definitely the resources from Microsoft, OpenAI, and even Google, their blogs about AI, they're really great. I would also recommend just go on LinkedIn and search for different influencers. And I hate this word, but there are some smart people posting about AI from various angles, from various domains, various industries. But make sure that you just subscribe to those changelogs of the products that you feel that are relatable to you, because you will see some massive improvements over the time. So there's not a single silver bullet that you should just follow. Just try to stay on top of the trends, and just try to imagine what are the different applications that it can have. But really, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, all heavily investing into AI. We'll see what Apple is going to introduce this fall. So I'm betting it's going to be massive as well. So we're just at the very beginning, and more is to come. So brace yourself.
Uh-oh, brace yourself. You gave us a little bit of Game of Thrones there in the Czech Republic. So, Martin, thanks so much for coming on. This was fantastic.
Thanks for having me.